Then we're live. Hello, everyone. This is Michael Sillion. I'm going to go live here with my presentation of future navigation. So this is a presentation I've been working on many years. And this is a new version of this that I call How to Navigate an Event-Driven Learning Society and Understand Collective Value Creation with Michael Sillion. Captain Future, that's me. So we'll go explaining how a society works and how an economy works and how you navigate that. So what is a society? Societies are a way for organizing collective value creation and consumption. And so by that what I mean, like value creation is anything we need or anything we want. And it's the way we humans do it because we are not so self-sustaining mammals that can do everything for our own in nature, and we certainly isn't it in a modern society with millions of services and products and things like that. So all of human history is a series of events. An event can create, consume, destroy, transfer, or and remix value. All events are stringed together over time in direct or indirect journeys and connected in systems and networks. So all events appear in systems and networks, so they trigger each other. For an individual, for a group, for a place, or for a narrative, they are all connected in this essence. So this is very confusing in the beginning, but as we delve deeper into this presentation, you will understand exactly what I mean. That is my hope, at least. Uh, so um, we have the learning ability to notice and affect all events. We enable them to take place or against them not to. All living agents and recently agency artifacts use narrative instructions to make events happening. That means that for any event to happen in society, from like large and small, like short or long, we enable for them or we enable against them. And as living agents, we carry out personal events, but as a group, we carry out collective events as well. And that's true for our body as well. Our body is a vessel of many cells and bacteria that doesn't carry our DNA, and they all create their little small events, but collectively they give rise to our human events or human scale events, like my personal events, the things I do in a day, the things I do in an hour, the things I do in a year, and stuff like that. So all this gives rise to what we call systems that in turn spins the event wheel. I will go back to the event wheel later. Systems can learn and adjust their events and in turn make new events. This is what a learning society is. And I will come back to this. This is an overview of the things I will go out with you things. So we start with what is value creation? The things we need and the things we want. It's a very broad and very loosely defined thing because for every person, value is it's not the same every day, and for every uh, organizations like a family, a company, a tribe, a city, a country, uh, this is redefined every day. But it usually stays the same from day to day. But there's the possibility to redefine it as events go on. Uh, every event then we talked about event before, every event has the opportunity and to create value, so it's an opportunity for value created, it's an opportunity to transform, it's an opportunity for value upgraded, it's an opportunity for value remixed, it's an opportunity for value transported, it's an opportunity to for value marketed, or it's an opportunity for value facilitated. But it's mostly also like we create value, but we also consume value or exhaust it. Different things. When you exhaust value, you will get it back by regeneration, regrowth, or rest, or something like that. And it will come back, the value creation. But it's also what we call, we can destroy value, or we can lose it, like sending it, bury it underground for millions of years, or send it to outer space. Like, it's not destroyed, but it's lost for us. We can't retrieve it in the time scale, the present time scale. If we dig something down and find it 20 years later, it was lost for 20 years, so it's value lost. Yeah. So what then is future navigation? Some call it this future literacy. How do we navigate the way the future appears to us? So the future is not a place we can visit like tomorrow. There's a distinction here. The future is a direction, like the collective events we do today will create tomorrow. But the future is the direction in the like the agenda behind the events we do today. So there's the two aspects of the same thing. So the future is the direction we take for like a preferable tomorrow to happen. So a preferable tomorrow is it depends on the direction we take today, and that is the future. The future is the direction, is not the tomorrow itself. And for as long as the universe has existing, we have had what we call a learning galaxy. So the universe started out with helium and I forgot the English name for that, but helium and hydrogen, yeah. And then it got heavier and heavier elements. So for the Earth to exist as it does today, we think it's gone through at least 4 supernovas to create iron and heavier elements like lead and uranium and things like that. That they were not around in the first supernova or the second supernova, perhaps the third, probably the fourth, or maybe the fifth supernova to create all the elements that is present here on Earth today. And it wasn't a singular episode. We can see that the universe learned to do this. It isn't communicated in the essence we think about learning today. So it isn't, as soon as one supernova made the first iron atom, it didn't call up the other suns and say, look what I made. And it happened simultaneously, but it happened over time, and it was not there from the beginning. So in essence, the universe learned to make iron, and it in essence also like it learned to make solar suns and solar system with planets and moons and asteroids and all these things. It happened over time. So it was a learned process because it emerged over time. So it's not the definition of learning we use here today. But on this planet Earth that they eventually evolved, the galaxy learned to make. We don't know if there are more planets like Earth we know there are more planets, but we don't know why they're exactly a planet like Earth that has the possibility to create life. But life in itself evolved here on Earth, and life in itself went through. They invented DNA, and DNA made it possible to die off and give rise to a new generation of new DNA that experimented what works and doesn't work, and that's a learning process. And life on the planet for a very long time before us, we went really good from singular cellular organism to multicellular organism. We learned how to evolve life, and now we have the riches that was here before we came along in the biosphere. So many species of all kinds of plants and animals and bacteria and fungus and things like that. And it learned to do that over time. But then came humans, and we took learning to a whole new level because we figured out how do you supersede the DNA process of evolution, like waiting for the one generation day off to experiment with the new generations. We could store learning and knowledge outside ourselves. So we are born pretty useless, but we can teach our young but for the stored knowledge inside humans and also outside humans, between humans, we figured out writing and things like that to store, and stories to transfer information between humans. So a single human didn't hold the single information that it landed young, because we could transfer it between culture. And then we had an evolution of learning itself. We as we stored things outside ourselves, we figured out how to improve both the storage and the things we stored over time as well. And today we have the rich world we have today, with our rich culture for everything from books, movies, radio, audio, and now the internet. The internet in itself was an explosion in what we call content, and we say things we learned to produce. So we is in this learning explosion. Like it's amazing how much more content we just make today compared to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. And we know that for at least for now, a year from now, we will continue to make ever more learning and content that we put, especially on the internet. And we don't know how long this cycle will continue, but we know that we're not finished. There will be more new content tomorrow. So this is how we will explore this. So now we go back to the universe. So what is an event? I talked about events before. An event, simply a definition of an event on human scale, is that when something changes. So when something changed in the universe, there was an event. Like there was a regular event, like the circulation of galaxies, and the circulation of suns inside a galaxy, and the circulation of planets within a solar system, and the circulation of moons and other celestial orbit around planets and around suns and stuff like that. But and then we had violent events like supernovas and black holes and things like that disrupted things and gave rise to things. But every event was triggered by energy, and it created what we call physical artifacts. Artifacts are everything from galaxies, suns, planets, asteroids, and things. And on a smaller scale, on a planet, there are things we call a mountain ridge is an artifact, a sea is an artifact, but also like a small bay is an artifact, a small island, and a small pebble, and down to grains of sand. A grain of sand is an artifact. You can scale it up and you can scale it down, but that has been around for a very long time, like inorganic matter. And they can store and be energy, and they can transfer energy, and every time something changes, that gives rise to what we call an event, and that has been the case for the whole universe. We know that life is not common in the universe, what we know of today. So most events are non-biological or non-organic. But then, and they gives rise to what we call system patterns of events. We now know that there's planets around most suns. So it's not a one-off in our solar system. We know that this is system and patterns of events. There are probably comets and asteroids in every solar system and stuff like that. And they look fairly similar everywhere. So we know the difference between smaller solid planet like ours and gas giants and stuff like that. There are patterns everywhere. So it's not a one-off. No, every single artifact, of course, is unique in its composition, but there's many systems and patterns throughout the universe. And they all use what we call the laws of physics. So we can calculate them and study them thanks to us now, thanks to our learning. We know about this now. And they learned over time. So there was the learning there. So this is what the universe looked like before life came along. Yeah. But then living agents, life came along. And now it gets complicated or complex, as we say today, because we invented living agents. That is singular cells, plants and animals and fungus and things like that, they could trigger an event. We could create an event like a life cycle, a day in a living organism's life, things happening, like, and now animals moving around mostly, plants and trees was growing and or moving around slowly, but we moved around quickly. So these events doesn't get explained directly by the laws of physics. There's something else. If you look from Earth from outer space, we can't explain why an animal climbs up a mountain. There's no laws of physics that said that we should climb up a mountain. We should fall down using gravity and things like that. And that is what a living agent does. And we do this with a kind of nervous system or instruction or a brain. Most living organisms have a nervous system or a brain. Singular cells don't have a nervous system or brain, but they use other biochemicals, things to trigger what we call events. And that is what we call agency. And for that to happen, there's an instruction inside the living organism. How do you interpret this chemical? How do you interpret this hormone? How do you interpret this electrical signal? And in us more advanced living animals with brains, how does a thought pattern inside the brain trigger an event? And that's what everything like that is a narrative. So there is a narrator inside our head. That's a narrator event that gives rise to physical events. And there's also something more about this there's a type of energy that's been around for a very long time. It could be light, it could be vibration in the air and stuff like that. And for a very long time, this was very weak energy. Light didn't move much object around, more perhaps melting comets and stuff like that. But on a planetary scale, light didn't move mountains. But or sound vibration wasn't that profound like the wind, but maybe deeper vibrations from an earthquake could tumble down a mountain like that and stuff like that. But it gave rise to signals that we can interpret light, like the light from the sun says it's time to go up. It's not the light from the sun itself that makes us go up, but we interpret the light as a signal. And thanks for our narrative brains, we can say, now it's time to do this, now it's time to do that, thanks to these signals. And we have evolved a very sophisticated society today. We will focus on humans going forward, not animals. But we evolved in a very sophisticated society where there are all kinds of signals through written text, through alarm bells, through ring signals, through alarms, and all other things that when we hear a car, we react to that, or we hear something, or we see something. We interpret that signal and act accordingly and create events thanks to this signal. And all of this, of course, gave rise to the pattern that we today call society on a human scale. So this is a pattern, a system of events that has been recurring since we had society, like with the first human societies, hunter-gatherer tribes, to when we became farmers and things like that. They were all systems. Today we plow the earth and we see the grains, and then they grow, and then we harvest them. And it's a patterns of events that recur throughout Earth in our societies for a very long, long time. And of course, this gets more complicated as today's society. It's so many events that occurs in a day, in a single town, in a single community, or a single country, or the whole biosphere, that is mind-boggling, the amount of events that is triggered by events today. So all these instructions are triggered by what we call narratives. So what is a narrative then? A narrative, I'm going to give a very wide definition of narrative. We can call it agency dust or narrative instruction that gives rise to what, of course, all living animals has this, but now we focus on humans. So all the kinds of narrative instruction or agency does that gives rise to human behavior. And it, of course, starts with what all living animal organisms have: DNA, nervous systems, and brains. That they, in turn, can learn behavioral patterns, that we learn how to do things and we can repeat them every day or every week or every month, like that. And we learn that ripe fruits on an apple tree can trigger the behavior of picking and eating these fruits. And we also learned that the non-ripe fruits are not not that good to eat. So we don't eat unripe fruit. We don't eat poisonous fruits because we learn that over time, and it gives rise to behavioral patterns and habits. But we have that today narrative instruction is so much more. We have feelings, emotions as humans. We have human culture. We have been having symbols and language and music and dancing for a very long time. We started well, as we evolved language. We started giving names to things, uh, and we started gathering information and data, of course, stored in human memory from the beginning and transferred for stories. But today we can store that outside our bodies in so many ways, and we have that gave rise to what we call knowledge and science, insights, and we have what we call wisdom, living experience of being a human. So we can transfer wisdom to our next generation. What is a good way to live? This is something much deeper than information and insight. So wisdom is how do we make a good life to give? And we come to the definition of good is varying, of course, but good enough. And that gives rise to stories and myths, and then we discovered writing and books, and we keep throughout the ages that gives rise to lore and canon, and we have something called imagination. That's an ability humans have to imagine things not yet seen or done, so we can make things up. And that's a fantastic way to create new narratives. You can make up things of world, like we use fantasy or science fiction today. We can make up narratives uh, around worlds we have not seen or wouldn't exist outside our own minds. And that's what we call imagination. And it gives rise to what we call stories and myths and simulations, fiction and science fiction. And today we have movies and TV series and pods and blogs and radio shows and newspapers, and we store all these kinds of narratives inside these different kinds of mediums and artifacts, and also like for that we have agendas. Every human living have agendas that trigger what do you want, and we act accordingly. We don't always get what we want, but we act in direction of what we want, and maybe we get it. Some more than others. And we also invented rules and laws and policies and bureaucracy and politics and institutions to keep track on human behavior, so that it doesn't go wild, or that it stays beneficial. So there's enough food for the next year. There's enough grain to seed for the next sowing season, so we don't eat all the grain, and there's nothing to sow next year and stuff like that. So we gave rise to all kinds of systems of that keeps society going, so it doesn't die out. There's some civilization has died out when our policies or behavioral patterns terminated our own societies. And also there we have what we call schools of thoughts, ideologies, religions, all kinds of isms that has been flourishing in human culture. So there's no particular order here. I just tried to group them as best as I could. And then we have one of the most peculiar things, that what we call ownership. Like, of course, I own the cell. I control most of the cells and bacteria and organisms inside my body. The little there's like microorganisms and stuff that living on my skin and stuff like that. But me as a whole, my body. But then humans invented a way, like many animals, of course, invented this before us, like we call a territory. This is our turf. This is where I roam. This is where I eat. This is where I build my beaver dam, or this is where I graze, or this is where I hunt. That we call a territory, and that evolved into human ownership, where we now claim ownership of so many physical dead things, or biological. We can own a pet. We can own other human. We invented slavery to own other humans, and we started owning land. We started owning all things made up, and today we own imaginary things. We have creative licenses for we own narratives. So we can everything on this you see on this list we can own. There's an ownership, or indirect or direct or group ownership of all the other narratives we have in our society. And that gave rise to how do we how do we transfer ownership and value? Then we invented what we call currencies and money. And then, of course, keep track on that, we invented some of the earliest writing was not myths. It was what we think of bookkeeping today. We kept track on who owned what and who transferred what value to whom. So that was some of the early writings was just bookkeeping, was not to write down stories in itself. So it's a very old narrative invention as well. Then we fairly early we invented games. So that's a way, a structure play with instructions. So we create a temporary or sealed off environment of narrative instruction that is inside a game. And a game is such a wide aspect today. So, but from the beginning, this is a play. This is a meta narrative. So we play with narratives inside a concealed structure that we call a game today. And we invented maps and models to navigate the world, and that gave rise to frameworks. And today we have what we call tech, a whole area of uh, complex weaves of different types of narrative that we from the hardware to the software and things like that. And then we invented, of course, news. Oh, sorry, news is temporary narratives of what's going on today, this week, or something like that, as opposed to history, that is ancient narratives of things that happened in the past. And also, like, so, and that goes in hand with imagination, like imagining things that's gonna happen tomorrow. And social media was a very useful invention on tech and news and narratives in itself, and that we can talk for hours just on social media. But and we have what we call interconnectedness. That is how do we connect narrative together? So we figured out how to connect narratives together in a much more complex way than life itself did from the beginning. So life used the DNA to create behavioral patterns like that. But today we have so many more complex ways to interconnect different narratives together. And it gave rise to what we call goals today. Goals is a way uh, 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 it's a way to what we call the future. So we can set goals for the future so that some kind of tomorrow happens. Uh, and we have what we call identity and roles. That is how we identify ourselves as part of a narrative agent within a society. So what is my role? What type of narrative instructions do I carry out to create events that creates my day, my week, my year, or my life? Uh, and we also have something inside our brain that is very peculiar called mirror neurons that enables us to mimic other behavioral patterns. So there's a special function in our brain, so we can just look at something and repeat it and play with it and things like that, and that give rise to mimicry. And of course, we have what we call human drives and human desires that give rise to some kinds of event that is a deep narrative instruction inside us that gives rise to patterns of events in itself. And we have empathy and compassion that's very essential for a social species like us. If we don't care for each other, we can't create value together. We have to live together, accept each other, understand each other. And the better we are at this, the better we become at collective value creation. So this empathy and compassion is very important for a collective value creating species like ourselves. And we also invented things like sacredness is discussed. This is things that lives in the animal kingdom as well. But this is perhaps our most profound feelings and emotions. They're very strong. They're stronger than what we have next to that. That is love and hate. So sacredness gives rise to things we keep holy. And if you defend what I keep holy, I get very upset. Then I can develop hate and things like that. But it's things we keep sacred are very profound for us. And if you don't know what you keep sacred, you should go look. Because once you understand what you keep sacred, and when someone offends it, you won't get as offended if you become self-aware of the process of sacredness and offending in itself. And we also have what we discuss. Disgust is a very useful feeling for animals that we ate tainted bad food and stuff like that, we throw up. And of course, this isn't a function in our body that's very useful because we don't get poisoned and die. But the feeling of disgust in itself has been disconnected for the mere life-saving things. So now we can feel disgust for things that are not life-threatening for us, and that is perhaps the most profound feeling at all that gives rise to much of the hate and misunderstanding in the world, because we feel disgusted about it, and that it's been hijacked by a narrative process in our brain. Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind, talks very much about this. Sadly, we don't, since he came out with that book, the discussion around sacredness and disgust has died away. We talk about love and hate a lot, but seldom about this more profound feelings and emotions. But love and hate, of course, very profound. The things we love, things we hate. We love each other, but we also hate so much. And hate comes often from disgust and sacredness. So I hate you for defiling my sacred object, or I hate you for evoking a disgust feeling inside me, even though you're not threatening my life by poisoning me directly, because I'm not going to eat you. And then gives also right. Well, group thinks is another type of narrative. Like as soon as a group comes together, their behavioral narrative patterns clustered together. So different groups have different patterns, and we seek out people who have similar patterns to us. And by that, when we bring people together that have similar patterns, they enhance each other, and that's what we call groupthink. We also have what we call biases. So we have, thanks to the brain, the brain has never given us a direct physical interpretation of what the world is or what the human narrative-driven society is, because it has our narrative system have flaws that gives rise to what we call biases. So we misinterpret reality, misinterpret each other, and that's systemic as well. So there's a group of I don't remember the exact, but the hundreds of different biases that are born inside the human brain. And that is a problem for us. If we can't recognize when we're biased, we create the wrong event, if you get what I mean. And we have what we call values. That was called to values in English is things, the things we value, and also things that are valuable for us. In Sweden, we have separated this into two words called värde and värderingar. But in English, it's two meanings in one word. But when I'm foremost in this presentation coming forward, I will talk about things that are valuable for us, what we call värde in svenska. And that gave valuable product and services came along to help our life getting better, more enjoyable, but foremost like more practical. So we invented tools, and tools gave rise to create more valuable products, and more valuable products gave us easier life. So then we have more time to invent more tools, and it became a self-playing system in that essence. And of course, that gives rise to transfer all this kind of value we have in products and services today. We had markets where we can go and exchange. So if I was really good at making apple pie, I can trade that to someone who was really good to making shoes. And we're all happier for it, because as a specialist in making apple pie, I can make a lot more apple pie than you as a novice. And you as a specialist in making shoes, you can make a lot more shoes than if everyone made a shoes by themselves. So by specialization, we saved time, and in that we gave rise to more and better products and services. So markets was the way to transfer that. And in a market, of course, then we could come up with what we today call brands. And brands, of course, a way to market things. So brand is also a narrative. Today, it's very many products and services today have what we call a brand. That's a naming narrative, but also a group narrative of things that belong together. So one brand can have many different kinds of products and services that's all connected to what we call a brand. So that's a special kind of narrative in itself. And today in the IT world, we came up what we call programming code and programming and code that give rise to tech in the IT industry. And programming code is, of course, what some of us say our brain runs on code. No, doesn't run on code. It runs on narratives. But narrative code is very, very specific. A code does exactly what you code it to do. Uh, in a simple term, but the narrative doesn't. The narrative, it's way more complex. So we shouldn't compare our brains to computers and say that it's the coding or the programming language inside us that give rise to behavior, because narratives are way more complex. And like you said, it's the whole list here. Code is just one thing, but there are hundreds of things on my list here if you divide them up into smaller and smaller things. And today we have also what we call memes. That's a short narrative instructions that has a light on their own, especially on the internet. But memes were around in papers and even the Hunter Village tribe. Every Hunter Village tribe had their meme, like an inside joke or inside story that they shared there, and it could propagate for time. Some things stayed around for a week, some things stayed around for several generations, and stuff like that. So it's a lifespan of a narrative, and so on and so on. I'm just touching on what this is, and we call this. I call exploring what all this in narrative instructions and agency does. This I call that narrative literacy, and that's something we have to be really more profound, because every day people are asking us, why did that happen? And every day we wish for things to happen, and every day we make things happen. And it's all because of narrative instructions. Every single event in human society happens because of many interconnected narratives. So that is the interconnectedness, the meta narratives. So it's not that you can never explain a single human event for one narrative. You have to understand all the things on my list here, and so on, to understand what gives rise to a specific event in a daily human's life, in a city, or like the things that show up in the news. And there's always an expert that try to explain what happened, and they single in or one or two or three narratives. When you can see from my list, you have to take all this into account, more or less, of course. So it's not that like they're not evenly distributed, but more or less you have to take a lot more of things into account when you try to explain why an event happened. And also when you want to make an event happen, like we have a planning on work today, and today we're going to do this and that, and then that happened, and you didn't finish in time, and the product didn't turn out as you wanted to be. But we have getting very good in organizing value production in what we call companies or organizations or institutions today. We have become very good to narrow down the exact narrative instruction that gives rise to this specific product. But we also like surrender to that. We think that just because we're so good at it, every exact narrative will be the same, because we think of it as computer code, but it isn't like that. Whenever an anomaly or accident happens, we ask so many questions. How could this happen? Because of the narratives, of course. So if no humans can see the whole weave of what we call narrative, the narrative field that gave rise to the singular pattern. But that doesn't mean it isn't there. It's just too incomprehensible for a single human or a group of humans to understand. So that is narrative. Hope you're with me for so long. And of course, when you delve into this, we come back to the map here. When we add evolution and learning societies, today we also have the ability to have what we call complex artifacts with behavior, narrative agency and learning. We created machines that we could program or trickle, and today we have advanced computer and robots and AI that can act on their own. They're not a living agent. They're what you call an artifact agent. They have no biological mass for most cases. In most cases, so they act on instruction programmed and things like that. And now that evolves into AI, that isn't like a single computer code that does exactly what it tells you, because it can give rise to even complex behavior inside narrative artifacts. And that's a field of study in its own. But you have to be very aware of that is what's happening right now. From the first programmable machines in the 16 and 1700s with cogwheels inside them and clocks and automas. There's some go search YouTube for some documentary about the early automas, the chess playing machines and stuff like that. Very fascinating. So what's the first our attempt to create narrative artifacts? And of course, all this gives rise to what we call ecosystems of learning networks of agents, artifacts, vessels, narratives, events, and arenas. So in this essence, many people talk about the agent arena, the relationship. So for an event happens on an arena. So arena is the physical place or the internet place, whatever, the place where an event takes place. And the agents involved is the creator of the event. But as I want to expand more to that, what we said, where agents and artifacts, of course, involved in an event happening. If I hit a bat, baseball bat, and throw a volleyball, there's a baseball player that's a living agent, but the bat is the artifact in this essence, if you get what I mean. And the event is hitting the ball and making the ball fly and stuff like that. And the ball is an artifact in itself. And the arena is the baseball arena. But also there's vessels for this to happen. Like there is a team, is a vessel for several agents. There's a vessel, so a single human is a vessel for all the cells and bacteria inside one body. So I am a vessel for all my cells and all my bacteria. That makes room, and that creates what we call a hyperagent. This is, I'm a hyperagent for my cells, and then we have other hyperagents. A team, an organization is a hyperagent that consists of many different artifacts and agents and stuff like that. So this is a hyperobjects, hyperagents, and then of course what we call hyper narratives. When I talked about before when explaining narratives. So many narratives are so interconnected and connected, so we can't talk about a single narrative. That is the fault of what I discussed before, and we can call that hyper narratives. So the primary narratives that give rise to this, so not all of them, but the primary, that we connect them together in what we call a hyper narrative. So this is navigating an event-driven learning society. So now we're getting to the interesting part. So some thoughts here. So we are learning mammals in a learning society. We are extremely habitual. That's very, very useful for us. We mostly do what we did yesterday, unless forced to do differently. Narratives we live after, in this case, often forms when we are young. So we form habitual ways of living and doing our daily lives, so that every day when you wake up, you don't have to learn how to get dressed, eat, go to work and stuff like that. You just know it by habit. And it's very useful, so you don't have to think about all the things you do by habit, tying your shoes, putting a fork in your mouth and stuff like that. It's very habitual, very useful, but it also, in some cases, this misfires. So if there is no shoelaces in your shoe, this misfires because you don't know what to do, because your habit is to tie the shoelaces. But since the shoelaces are missing, you have to start inventing and okay, do I have to get new shoelaces? Can I use something else to tie the shoe on and stuff like that? You have to become creative and experiment and play. And that's the fourth point when something is missing. But we also do, point two, we also do as the people around us, mimicry, norms, conformity, social things like that. So as a human tribe, hunter-gatherer tribe, and then the farmer village and then town, we do like most people around us, because it's very useful to fit in. So even if I'm the shoemaker and you're the farmer, we don't do exactly the same, but we think and talk about our village the same way. So we do, we listen to the same kind of music, and we cheer for the same local sports team and things like that. So we are conformative creatures, and we mimic the ones around us, and it's very useful as well. But sometimes that misfires as well if you can if you can get the fourth train going there. We also do as we are told. It's very useful. We have hierarchical systems, or we have parent figures, or bosses, or dictators, or villains, or so authoritarian. But we do as we're told. Some we trust, like people who have earned a trust, a teacher, a mentor, a friend, a family member, or coach, or something like that. Someone we trust tells us do like this, and we trust them, and we do like they say. Or like someone we look up to. Today we have invented what we call celebrity, but also like role models and thinkers is the first kind. It's like we, they don't tell us directly, so they didn't give us direct instruction, but we look up to them, and we try to make what they do, or make as they insinuated, or something like that. So it's not direct contact. And today's celebrity status and of course influencers online is the influence, of course, to influence my behavior is their primary objective. So that's like someone we look up to. For good and bad, we can look up to good people, or we can look up to bad people to make us do good or bad stuff. Or we do as the story tells us, because we have instructions inside stories. And we have like direct instructions. You read a manual, and we do as the manual tells us to do. It's of course this is much more complex and wider spread out. So there's very complex narrative structures in our society that tells us what to do, and we try our best, or we try our worst to do as the instructions say. But well, like I touched on before, as soon as we have something misfires, we have the ability to play and experience and try out and experiment and fail and learn. And that's the most fantastic thing. We can adjust our habits by necessity, or by force of will, or just like curiosity and things like that. And that's how invention happens through play. And also it comes back to learning. Learning happens through experience and experimentation and failing and stuff like that. We learn to walk by falling over, and soon we get it and stuff like that. And everything goes by this. So this is very important for learning. We're learning new habits and when we grow up, and learning new habits when we're old as well. We have the ability to do that our whole life. So this is a sum up of thinking about habitual behavioral patterns that comes from various kinds of narratives. Yes, now we're done with that for now. So that was the learning society. Now I'm going to talk about what is an economy. And this is the second part. And the third part is, how do we navigate a society and an economy? How do we put it all together? So this is part 2. What is an economy? So there are so many ways. When you say economy, most people think about money and finance and things like that. But that's a very new invention, and it's very, very, very strange that we put so much focus on that. Because way before we had money, and way before there was human life in its essence, the economy means play with and sustain resources for continued play. So for a human society, we have the resources we have in the hunter-gatherer society, on our land, in the farm, in the city, or in the country, and or in the globe, and we have to play what we make do, and everything comes from two places. It's either biosphere, that's the thing we have here on top of the molten core of Earth. There's a thin layer that we call the biosphere. Almost every human activity happens within the biosphere. We seldom dig too deep mines below the biosphere, but that's still livable space. And we have sent very few people into space or the moon that survived outside the biosphere in artificial conditions, but that's not sustainable for long for now. So we still confined to this biosphere. So the biosphere is our primary resource. And inside the primary, for anything to happen, like I said before, we need energy. No event ever happens without energy, however small or insignificant or however large. So an energy comes, uh, uh, doesn't, the biosphere doesn't make energy. Energy comes from outside a biosphere, and it comes from suns. It comes from our sun, and that's what we call direct solar energy. It's come from our sun, called the sol, solen in Swedish, sol in English, and that is primarily plants or plankton that capture solar energy and make it into carbohydrates that is contained in energy. And for a very long time, that was this. Most energy came from the sun directly, in that essence. There was some bacteria and stuff like that way before we learned. There was many bacteria before that on Earth, before we learned chlorophyll and the process of capturing sunlight. There was what we call the ancient solar energy. That is biochemical energy in either molecules or what we call uranium or plutonium, like that. That is ancient solar energy that wasn't created in our sun directly. Well, or there is some cases where the heat from the sun or the heat from the earth created biochemical molecules that you can extract energy from. So, but the heat in our inner core in the planet doesn't come from our sun. It comes from what we called ancient solar system. They said the supernova exploded before that made our solar system, and it formed our sun, and it formed our molten core. The molten core doesn't come from our sun; it comes from a different sun. So that's ancient solar energy. And we have what we call also old energy. That is the fossil energy that we're now discovering. That is coal and oil. Coal is peat that was formed between 300 and 200 million years ago. Old plants that formed peat and then fossilized into stone energy, called what we call coal. And we also have what we call oil that formed perhaps 250 million years ago to 150 million years ago. That is what we call wet biomass. That's mostly plankton that fell to the seafloor and then got buried when the tectonic plates shifted. So it got pressured into beneath the earth, what we call oil, the natural or fossil gas. But some people say the common name is natural gas, but the real name is, of course, fossil oil and fossil coal and fossil gas. They're all fossil energy. That was called old. But in today's direct solar energy world, we figured out how to capture energy in so many more ways. We don't need plants. We can capture electricity from solar energy, wind energy, or water dams. But apart from that, most of the energy comes from what we call food. We say plants making it happen. So that's the three different kinds of energy: direct solar energy, old solar energy, and ancient solar energy from a different sun than ours. So then we have an economy. And apart from that, that was the case for a very long time. But so there was an economy, a living biomass economy, way before humans came along, animals. Uh, uh, but then we came around, and if you remember one of the first slides, it said the learning evolution of humans, and we created what we call narrative capital. It's so much more the capital and instructions that weren't here before us. So this became a whole own category that is today threatening the very life of the biosphere itself, because we can't understand and navigate narrative capital, and that's what I'm here to help you with. So this is the big crash course in navigating an economy, and that's so this is there's the three only types of resources we have here. We have our biosphere, and we have the energy that every event inside every event inside the biosphere uses to make events. And then we have the narrative capital, that is the instructions for an event to happen. So coming back to the beginning, everything is an event. When something changes inside the biosphere, oh, it's an event. And it comes and it needs energy to happen. And the trigger itself can be the physical laws or narrative capital. And then I expand, bam, everything all at once. So if you expand all this into different categories, in many cases overlapping types of resources and capital, you get this map that I have spent the last 6 years putting together in a comprehensible way. I've added things to it slowly over time, but this is to make sense of what the economy is. And you can see beneath biosphere capital, there's a category called financial capital, currencies, monies. So when you say economy, what is an economy today in the news or in a dinner conversation or in a political debate, people think about money. But all this here, everything in this map is an economy. Everything is a capital or a resource that we use to make events happen in a human society. And that's what I'm going to explore here now. What is an economy? So we can expand some of the most understandable things is down in the left corner. We have what we call mineral capital. It's the things that is not biological capital. There's things we dig up, things that are in our service. It's from sand, metal, water, salt, things like that, rock, unorganic material. And then we have what we call biological capital. It's everything in nature. Wood is the one, most of things, soil, food, and oceans. Oceans are filled by biological capital. And that is everything. Us, we are biological capital. We can use us and all living things as a resource, and we do. And from all that we learn to make what we call structure capital. That's all the artifacts and hyper objects in our society today, from the bridges to the clothes to the molecules in our medicines, to the silicon chips, houses, cars, everything we created that nature itself hasn't created, the things we figured out. But we can also be things nature created, like a seashell that is not living. It's a calcium shell that the living organism made. So the seashells is also kind of a structural capital in its essence. So you can get, this is very wide group, and you can talk for hours about just this simple group. But this is the most understandable. But then we go to the top middle, and that's what we have human capital. So human capital is, we talk about the human society here. Human capital is all the things we know how to do, all the kinds of events. So it's all the skills, all the culture we have, all the competence. We also can include health and culture here. So human capital are part of our as biological agents and all the narratives inside us, but also like all the narratives between us. Like culture and stories and instruction and policies and laws and books and social media memes. Everything there is grouped in what we call human capital. And we also have connected things that these are overlapping what we call social capital. So that's all the relationship between humans and other living agents, like the relationship you have with your farm animals or a pet or something like that. So what we call social bonds between living organisms, and we need that resource. We have, the better we can collaborate, the better we can make better value, or even like in the structure sense, the better we can coordinate an army, the better we can destroy or kill something else. So it's not just used for good; it can be used for bad as well, destroying. So we have So, but it's the way we organize society today. And from that, we go to what we call governing or entangled capital. That's how we organize every event in society. How do we organize them so we know that the right type of events takes place and the wrong ones doesn't. And that's right and wrong is of course in interpretation, because that's up to every interpreter and narrative in itself uh, to say what is a good or a bad event. And usually it's connected, because today we make many what we think good events, but they have cascading or unintended consequences on other, directly or indirectly. So it's all connected. A single event doesn't just create one value. A single event can, for a chain of connection, create lots of different or destroy different kinds of values. So in this essence, one type of group from entangled capital we call political capital. That's political means making decision in groups, from everything from the family size up to government or the UN. So political capital means making decisions in groups. Who makes the decision over whom? And what that creates a vision event. And then we have power capital. Power capital is connected to that. Some people, organizations, or groups have more say in this. They have more power, so they make their events happen at the expense of happen other kinds of events that some weaker power group want to happen, but they couldn't because they hadn't access to all the other resources you see in this map. And that's power. Power gives you access to all the other kinds of capital in this map. And so power capital is very important in that essence. To make something happen, you have to have access to all kinds of capital, and that's what power gives you. Political capital and power capital are connected. And then we have what violence capital is also connected. It is most modern states today have violence monopoly. That means they have an internal police force and they have an army. And if someone else tries to enforce something using violence, either the threat of violence or the actual use of violence, they have what we call violence capital. Often a destructive kind of way that destroys value, using things like weapons and other kinds of structural violence capital. If you go back to the structural capital down in the left corner, and that of course everything here is overlapping and connected. So violence capital is of course connected to structural capital in form of weapons, and today it's tanks and planes and warships and stuff like that, but that we use as connected to the violence capital. So that's, and also like if you think of a modern Western society today, we have a police that has violence capital, but there are all kinds of organized violence capital that is unlawful. Let's say the crime syndicates and small time thieves and thugs that acts on their own in small groups, but also like organized crime, that of kind of violence capital that is outside the rule of law, and that's all connected. For rule of law is a narrative and things like that. So what we deem as lawful or unlawful is a narrative, but they can have violence. So it's approved violence capital and unapproved violence capital in a society. But we also have on the bottom right corner is the other part of entangled capital. But of course, you can't just have a political system and power to make a society happen. The primary things that happen throughout time is, of course, what you call coordination capital. How do you distribute value, and how do you make the right kind of value appear for the ones who need it or want it? And that is coordination capital. That's markets primarily, but also the caring family, or from the caring hunter-gatherer tribe up to a caring society today. A caring society makes sure that the people that need some kind of value gets it, and some people that want some kind of value gets it. So that's a coordination. Logistics is a very another name for coordination capital, but coordination capital is wider than just logistics and distribution of mainly physical goods, but also like services. So, but market use logistics to distribute value between different markets, and over today we have a global market that is a very large logistical coordination system that is mostly run by what we have to the left of that, financial, currency and money capital. And that is for a long time, in the beginning, money in itself was a physical, or currency was a physical resource, like gold and silver, or coins and stuff like that. But and today it's very fictional. First we invented paper, and today it's just electrons in a database somewhere. We have never seen your money today. It just appears on a screen through magic. But it's very important to remember that even old time gold is just a narrative. Even if it appears gold is a physical artifact in itself, it's just a narrative capital. Because if you put some gold in nature and there's no humans around, nothing happens. And a perfect example of this, let's say that it cost 40 billion euros or whatever to build a base on the moon. So can we just send the money there, like in physical form, like in gold bars or duffel bags full of paper bills? Or even like just can we just swish the moon and the moon will build a moon base for us? No, we need all the other kinds of things. So it's just a narrative. Money doesn't do anything unless there is an agent around, like mostly human agents, but also like we can put money into a slot machine or a vendor machine, and they will produce value for us. But the value is not produced in the machine per se. Maybe a coffee machine today is putting together coffee beans on hot water and brewing coffee for us. That is a valuable product. And we can do that by pressing a button, like it's a narrative, or we can do that by inserting a coin in the old ways, or give it in an electronic swish, electronic instruction. But like, you get what I mean. Nothing happens. Money can't walk. Money can't talk. Even if the story says money walks and money talks, it doesn't. You have never seen money walk in itself, and you have definitely seen never money talk. It needs humans or other type of narrative artifacts to instruct them to do things. So money is just an instruction, and we give gold itself is like gold is a metal. It's not a money. Gold itself is not money. It's just a metal. It consists of gold atoms and gold molecules and things like that. So there has been gold on Earth since it started 4.5 billion years ago. There was gold on Earth, and that gold didn't build houses or make cars happen, because they needed humans to do that. So money is just a narrative. That's an understanding. But coming back to coordination capital, we have what we call caring and wisdom. Wisdom is a form of coordination capital. To make a flourishing village or a flourishing society today, we need wisdom, the experience of living. So if you start with a clean slate, we know nothing about what our parents or grandparents did before us. We don't have any wisdom. We have to learn everything from scratch. Of course, they can leave us books, but that doesn't. We can just not. If all our parents went away, and the society were just children, and there was books and instruction, they needed parents to learn them how to teach. They needed parents to teach them how to write. That's a simple example. But wisdom is way more complex than that. So the experience of living, living good, whatever definition of good you have, is what we call wisdom. And we need wisdom to coordinate global value creation today. We have forgotten about that, and that's why we see so many misfires today in creating events we don't want all over the world. If you watch the news, you can see all of the events are unwanted by many people, and that's why we lack. That's because we lack wisdom. So wisdom is very important, coordination capital. But I will come back to that. But if you go up to the left of human capital, you have what we call, that's very prominent today. We call attention capital. We call it all about the attention crisis or uh, 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 or the attention economy, and it has become a very prominent word thanks to social media and of course the documentary and the podcast by Tristan Harris that comes from the movie. So social, there's a quote in this movie called Social Networks, that is a fictional movie about the creation of Facebook. And one lawyer asked the actor that plays Mark Zuckerberg, do I have your attention? Do I have your undivided attention? No, you don't have my undivided attention. You are part of my attention. The rest of my attention is back at Facebook quarter creating Facebook. And for that we have the undivided attention. But attention is the combination of time and focus. And time is a real resource. Time is I will come back to what costs are very soon. But time, how we spend our time, the time of you, the time of someone's competence. That's what we call work hours. So who decides what an expert in the field does in a day? That's what we use their time to do something, and we make them focus on something. And if you want to understand how they play together, say you know how to do the dishes. You have done it so many times, you can do it without thinking about it. You spend your time doing the dishes, but you can have some earplugs in your ear, listening to a podcast or a YouTube show or radio. Or before that, we have radio in the background, so you can listen to music or radio while doing the dishes. So your focus was on both the dishes and the things you had in your ear. So you spent time on both, but your focus was mostly on the things you could do on a cognitive level, say the music or the podcast, because you can almost do the dishes on autopilots. And that's the difference between time and focus. But collectively we call them attention capital. And that's what you do in a day, in a year, in a work week, in a weekend. What do you have attention on? What do you spend your time on, and what are you focusing on? Your attention capital. And when that's become very prominent, because there's a new thing we call burnout, when people spend too much attention and time and focus, and we don't recuperate and focus on the right things. We feel stressful because we spend our attention capital wrong. And I'll come back. We can just mention in the corner we have what we call information capital, knowledge capital, story capital, society capital. That's part of our narrative capital. Information, knowledge, and stories has been around for a very long time, and as soon as we figured out how to store them in books and later in newspapers, in computers, on internet and TV shows and movies and stuff like that, it becomes a very prominent resource that we have a lot of, and we have entire industries creating story capital like the Hollywood, and we have entire industries creating knowledge capital like science institutions, and then we have like scientific capital. It's a very special type of information and knowledge capital, because we came up with a scientific method. So the scientific most information are lies, but scientific capital goes around like grains. It says, how can we make this type of information as little as lie as possible? So that there's a process that tries to falsify and verify the information we have. So say this is little as lie as possible, but all information and knowledge is a representation of reality. It's not reality itself. So in that essence, even the most scientific, pure things we have today is never 100% true. It's always a little simplification or representation, and some stories and information are outright lies. It's never true. It's just made up. But we have a scientific process that tries to verify and make an information as little as lie as possible. And we have forgotten the importance of that. Now there's a disdain for scientists and science, and we celebrate lies and buffoons who tell lies today, and clowns. Like it's very important to understand the importance of scientific capital and scientific process. That is to have information that is as little as a lie as possible, because without that we're lost. And then we have the last part with the heart between this, what we call flow state capital and meaning capital. Meaning capital has been around for long as we're human, that give rise to what we call our current cultural understanding of the world, that give rise to what we call meaning navigation of society, and that religions figured that out very quickly. Type of narrative that understood that we can have a common shared narrative for our society that could give collective meaning to us all through shared stories and shared behavioral patterns and shared many shared types of narrative that came together, what we call a religion. That is a type of group narrative in itself. But meaning, we humans need meaning. So meaning is a type of way we navigate the world, and it's connected to wisdom, but it's not the exact same thing. But we need meaning in our lives, and that's also something that is forgotten. Many people feel today that thanks to the misunderstanding of how to navigate and create value, we create so many meaningless or destructive events that we have a meaning crisis today. And John Vervaeke has explored this in a fantastic series, and then he now has a YouTube channel that has been going on for 6 years after that, where he explores the meaning crisis in society. And that's connected to what I call, and that's what I made up, flow state capital. Like, if you know what a flow state is, I can talk about this, but I suggest the book Stealing Fire for this. A flow state is two types. Not even in the book they distinguish between the two types of flow state, but I do that. I'm very interested in flow state. We have what we call high energy flow state and low energy flow state. High energy flow state is things when you go into flow, especially during dancing and raving and clubbing and things like that, or a concert. We have high pulse, we're dancing, and we don't feel fatigue. Of course, that can be enhanced for different types of altered states of mind that we can get from alcohol or psychedelics and things like that. But it's not necessary. Every type of substance or altered state of mind is already built into us. And I for one, I can go into flow state and trance without. I've never taken drugs, but I usually take alcohol because that alcohol helps me take away the fatigue. But I can do at least dancing without any substance for 2 hours without feeling fatigue to the right kind of music. When you go to the gym, or you do a favorite sport, you can also go into flow state when the spinning class and stuff like that. And it's also often connected to what we call music, a type of narrative capital that's very profound and emotional. We did our Glass Bead Games just before my session here tonight. We did a Glass Bead game on what music is. And music is connected to flow state and trance state generation in us. And music is way older than language. We had music and dances before we could speak. And we know that some whales have music of their own with hit songs and memes and things like that. I think it's a humpback whale, so they can create a hit song that travels across the oceans as a meme in itself, a type of narrative. But flow states, high energy flow states, are connected to dancing, rave, but also team sports. You can get into flow playing football or hockey or something together with a team. And Stealing Fire also explores flow states in what the Navy SEALs calls flipping the switch. It's a very fascinating book, or there are some YouTube talks about Jimmy Whelan. But very important, because flow states is a very important part of being a human and creating meaningful events. But we also have what we today discover what we call low energy flow state. That's when your pulse are not high, you're maybe moving, but also sitting still. That's something that exploded thanks to computer games and online gaming, but also like classical. I play a lot of physical board games, and but it happens also when you read when you're curious about the subject. You can sit and read about the subject for hours. You can play a board game for hours. You can play computer game for hours, and your attention is completely engulfed in this, and you forget time and space, and you even forget that you're hungry and stuff like that because you're too completely engulfed by this. But your pulse is not high, so it doesn't trigger many of the type of effects in your body when you're on a high energy flow state, like dancing or spinning and stuff like that. But they're both flow state, but there's some very clear distinctions between them. But some people can play computer games for hours. The first really profound event of this was when the first Civilization game came out in the early 90s on both Amiga and PC. And there was a concept called just one more turn. You couldn't stop playing. You had to play just one more turn. And I could go up in the morning. I can sit in my underwear the whole day. And when the sun went down, I just remembered that I had to go to the toilet. I hadn't brushed my teeth, I haven't dressed, I haven't eaten for all day. I just been playing Civilization the whole game in complete flow, but with a low energy flow state. My pulse wasn't high, my body wasn't moving. I was sitting still, but still I was in this cognitive flow. So there you have it, all kinds of capitals. Woohoo! I'm losing my voice here. So now we explored first what is a learning society, an event, and then we have explored what it's an economy. Of course, they are both connected. And now we're going to go into the last part. How do you navigate that? But first, something about costs. But it's very, very profound. Something I think about a lot. People, you can just turn on about any news channel or check your social flow on any social media or turn into a newspaper role, and they talk about it's going to cost this much to do that. And when they say cost, I mean money. But for society, money is never a cost. Like I said, money isn't real. And a cost, something is a cost for society when it goes consumed, spent, exhausted, destroyed, or lost. So you come back to the definition of value in the beginning. So we can destroy or lose value, but we can also exhaust and consume and spend value. And that is what we call a cost when it goes away permanently or for a while. Something valuable goes away or is destroyed. But money doesn't go away, it just exchanges hands. So for society, the money is still there. At least it was for a long time with physical gold coins and silver coins. But then when we invented electronic money, money can just go poof. Or of course, gold money could be lost by sinking on a Spanish gold galleon to the bottom of the sea, or someone a pirate burying a chest of gold somewhere unknown and losing the map. Then, of course, the money is gone and it's a cost, but not, you get what I mean. It's a very, very, very limited way of seeing that. But for today, maybe money can be created and lost in the blink of an eye using a computer. But money wasn't really in the beginning, so it's never a cost in that essence. But of course, for your personal household budget, you can feel that everything costs money. You feel, but not for society, because society doesn't lose its money. It just shuffled around, or in case of a computer, it's just a keyboard press. The money is perhaps still there. We don't even know because we can't see it. It's just it's completely imaginary inside a computer code or computer database. So when someone, for example, says it's going to cost this much money to rebuild something after a hurricane or an earthquake or a war, rebuild a city, rebuild a region or something like that, that's not really true. It's going to cost an enormous amount of resources, energy, time, and human well-being and human competence and time and attention. So if you have someone good at building something, that person can spend their time rebuilding a new home, or they can rebuilding a lost home. So the real cost is, of course, when how do we spend that time? Time is a real resource. How do you spend the time of a competent people or uh, competent person? But what we mostly don't talk about today is one of the two primary resources, energy and biosphere. It's going to cost energy. Energy, the cost of energy is when we transform useful energy into what we call heat, and heat dissipates through, we lose it over time into space by heat radiation. And we can't reuse it that simply. We have some ways of capturing heat after an event and then reuse it, but over time we lose energy. So energy is a real cost. We don't get it back. It doesn't regrow or regenerate in that essence, if you get what I mean. But so money is not the real cost, but energy and some of the physical resources are if you don't get them back. So, and time certainly we don't get back. Time is spent forever or lost forever, depending on how you frame it. The price is lost resources and time that could be spent much better on other things, and a lot of human suffering and habitat destruction. Of course, human suffering is a cost. But it's not directly measurable. But we measure things in money. That's because we don't really understand the complex weave of a true economy, if you remember my last slide here. So everything that gets spent or destroyed here is a cost. And since money seldom gets spent or destroyed on a societal level or a global level, the money is still around. It isn't a true cost, but we talk about it like it's the only cost. And as soon as we get this straight in our head to start understanding that, we can build a much better world and society. We understand fictional narrative costs and real costs. Money is a narrative currency and it's not lost and destroyed and will keep circling around, hopefully, or just being deleted in the database because it wasn't there from the beginning or stuff like that. So, but money, all the same, money is a super useful innovation because it enabled so much value transfer and value production in society as a narrative. But together with the other narratives, human ingenuity, behavioral patterns, and human capital, social capital, and things like that. But it's perhaps one of the best inventions we ever done. But today, we have so much value in society today, so you can use so much money to skim off the top. Many of the most ridiculously rich people in the world, they live life that kings and rulers 200 years ago couldn't even dream about the abundance and richness of some of the richest people with the most money today, because there's so much value they can skim off the top without the rest of society collapsing. Because if a king 200 years ago tried to take all the value in society, take that much value for himself, there would be nothing left for someone else. If someone took all the food, society would collapse because people would starve to death. But today there's so much extra food, so they can take so much resources away from us, and we still survive. And that's mostly thanks to fossil fuel. We have turned so much fossil fuel into value today, but we've done it in an unsustainable pace. If we keep doing this, there won't be much fossil fuel left for the coming million and billions of years. We just used it up very quickly. But we have completely obsessed with money and pricing almost anything in the same currency. There's fiat currencies, dollars, euros, Swedish crowns, and things like that. And we're doing it very wrong, as it turns out. When we price something, we don't either take the true cost, fossil fuel. So if you're gonna have a true market economy, you can't just take stuff from nature. Nature in itself has to be a market. So if you want to dig something up, you have to buy it from the earth because the earth has it now. So if you want to dig up a rare earth metal or gold or iron or dig up coal or oil or fossil gas, if you want to take it away from earth, you have to pay earth for it. Then then we have a functional market economy. But you can't just say I own this land and I grab it, because then we don't understand the true function of a market. So if we can get that right, we can have a functional marketing economy, and we can make money useful for us again if we pay for everything, not just the things we think is appropriate. But if we pay for everything, then of course it's not super perfect in any way, but it's way more way better than today, when we just take so much from. And we also don't pay for externalities. So if I do something with my product and services or my event and my behavior, I can create a lot of destruction of other values down the chain. So if I poison a lake, or if I poison the ground in a town, there's so much destruction. Indirect, direct poison, you can't use it to grow food, and people get cancer and stuff like that. There's some prominent documentaries about poison towns and poison wells and poison everything. If we don't, of course, that's because we didn't price the externalities. People who did the poisoning didn't pay the true price, that is the sanitation of the earth 20 or 100 years later. They didn't include that in the pricing of the event they that did the direct poisoning or the indirect poisoning years years ago, or currently, or stuff like that. We don't take into externalities and hidden costs are like connected, but things we don't know about, and we find out later because we didn't know that this was poisonous back when we used it. And that's of course, that's why we couldn't price it then. But sometimes today we know that something is poisonous and we still don't price it. But so the hidden cost is things we didn't know about, was that we didn't price. But today we have so many things we know about that this is not good for us, and we still do it. We poison habitats everywhere still, and we don't price the poisoning. So if you know what I mean, poisoning is called the extreme case. There's so many externalities, hidden costs, that this isn't direct lethal like poisoning, but are bad for us in the long term, or bad value, destroys values elsewhere and stuff like that. But if we can get that wrong, we can of course use money for a while. But there also case a deeper kind of navigation. What is a society and an economy, to truly understand how to create value for everyone, for as long as the earth and the sun is around, like millions and hundreds of millions, or even a billion years. So we have to separate cost and pricing. And we have to understand, when we use these words, what does it really entail? And that's what I'm trying to do with this simple navigation video I'm making here for you today. And this is same slide in Swedish, two same slides. And here's a simpler version of the complete with less words on it. If you thought there was too many words on the one, but this is an economy. All these slides, I have them as in Keynote, and you can get them as images or PDF if you want them. Yes, I will take a really short bio break and fill up my glass of water, and I will go into the third part of this presentation. Future navigation. How do you navigate all of the things I've talked about so far? I'll be back shortly here. I'm back, still running. This is so fun. I love doing this. So this is a what we could call a framework or a map of how do you navigate all the things I said before. It's not a model. This framework includes many models. How do you make useful events, and how do you navigate events and make events happen? And this is something that me, Michael Sillion, Carl McFall, and Bartola Bergstrand came up with, and we made this presentation before COVID. We traveled the world making this presentation, but nobody understand what we talked about because we skipped right past everything I've been talking for the last 1.5 hours directly into this. So now it comes to, with all the information I've given you so far, now this framework becomes so much more useful. So we're going to talk about the 4 aspects of an event spiral. So any event is connected for these 4 categories, and you can see the colors. There's 4 spiral arms in this event spiral. We call it future navigation. So how do you navigate our way into the future? The direction. You talked about this. Tomorrow is where tomorrow events happen, but the future is the direction we take to get there. So how do we understand the type of direction we need to do to make better events tomorrow than today, or even better events today than yesterday? So this is, and we group them into eventification, journeyfication, unification or weaving, and enablefication. And you can see the colors of the 4 spirals. They're dotted on the other type of spirals because they're not separate. They're all connected in this, what we call future navigation event spiral. So let's dwell into this. So we talked about event before. An event is everything that happens in the universe and in society. But on a useful scale, how do you navigate events? You can't take events that take microseconds, or you can't take events that take hundreds and thousands and millions of years on a human scale to make them useful for you and me. So unless you're a very specialized scientist specializing in this kind of very small or long event. But for us, this is like a navigation. Every event is a cosmic event that they run. We can predict them using math, like the trajectory of solar or celestial objects. We call them cosmic events, and we now have a society filled with what we call narrative events, that they're complex and chaotic, that we can't predict them, we can't calculate them. We have to use my framework for event navigation to even understand why they happened, what complex type of narratives made them happen, and how do we make more or less of them in the future. Dave Snowden talks about this in his Kinefin framework about simple, complicated, complex, and chaotic events. And most of much of our thinking comes from Snowden's thinking in his framework, Kinefin, around this. But I've expanded to it this is a different frame, looking on society through a different angle on the same type of thinking. So how do you make make our events more magical, meaningful, or value creating? So we're coming back to that. How do you make an event less destructive and more meaningful? In essence, that it creates value, where value is things we want and things we need. And we have also remember some rare cases of magical events for our life, and we want more of them and less of the more traumatizing, disturbing events that many of us also have in their lives, like the really bad, traumatizing things. And I certainly have them in my life. I've had magical weeks, and I have very traumatizing weeks in my life. And some people have had worse, and some people have had better than others. And stuff like that. But we understand that every event has the possibility, opportunity, or capability to be value destroying or value creating. And of course, how do we navigate a type of event? Make sure that this is the event we really want. And that is what we call event navigation or eventification of society. To understand every single event, what made them happen, like indirectly, of course, because we can't understand the complex narrative weave that triggered this type of event. But we can understand it in a simplified way, because we can see most of the cause and effect that gave rise to this type of event, but not in the complex sense I've talked about before. But we make events every day. We have to go up, we have to go to work, and we have to meet friends, and we have to do chores, and we have to do fun stuff and things like that. And they're all events. And how do we make the better of it as humans and as society? And that is what you understand when we talk about event navigation. You have to understand all the complex thing I've talked about before. This is like you're never done in this study of life and events. This is a lifetime commitment to understand what type of events make a better society. And understand the deeper understanding of event. An event is carried out by one agent or a group of agents, and an event takes place usually at the physical place that we call an arena. But now we have digital types of events and narrative types of events that doesn't use an arena in the typical physical sense, but it's still called the arena for the event. So it's a virtual or narrative arena, even for some type of narrative events. And try to understand what type of complex weave of narratives gave rise to directed this type of event. And if so, can we adjust the narratives to make more or less of this type of event? Dave Snowden talks about more of this and less of that, and but it's this complex weave. Understand every single event and how it's connected. So we're going to go into that today. An event is carried out by an agent at an arena directed by many narratives that is an opportunity to create value, connections, learning, and stories about the event. Sorry. Now we have what we call Journeyfication. Every agent, arena, vessel, and narrative is connected through a thread of events that gives rise to a path through time. And that's what we call journeyfication. Every type of agent has a journey, every type of arena has a journey, every type of vessel has a journey, and every type of narrative has a journey that is connected through time and to other types of all of the above. And that gives rise to a journey. Journey is usually through time. So your life is a journey, but also your day is a journey, or in the mere direct sense, your journey is a journey, and your trip somewhere is a journey. But the broader sense of a journey is your life is a journey, your career is a journey, your family life is a journey. The party that's going to take place over this weekend is a journey, but maybe it's in another town and you have to travel there and you have to make other things happen before and after that event. So they are all connected over time. And that is what we call journeyfication, to understand that. And I have come up with a term I called pathing literacy. So if you imagine a fictive or a direct, like a physical path or a fictive path, a narrative path for time for different kinds of events connected, they form a path. And if you look backwards, you can see the path that already been on. But looking forward, there's possibility of several paths. There's a fantastic illustration about this. I don't forget his name, but if you're interested, I'll link it in or get the things. So every looking back, you can see a single path, but you could also see, you can also like see what we say, what if paths. What if I have gone there instead and done that? Then this and this probably would have happened. So that's fictive paths in the past. There are some books, movies, and TV series that explore this. Like time traveling is, of course, one interesting things. There's now multiverse things and other. So there's some the Gwyneth Paltrow movie. I forgot the name, where she sliding doors that explores different pathings for life for using narratives in itself. But that is the essence of it. Pathing literature. Understand how by the path you've been on and the path where you're going. So that the current, and that connects to the current event today. What type of event today gives rise to my path towards tomorrow? That is what we say, future. That is what this is called, future navigation. The understanding that all paths connects and diverge to different futures, because all paths are connected. My path is connected to my friend's paths, my family paths, my organization's path, my country's path, and so it's connected to all types of paths. The narrative path. So my agent path is connected to various narrative paths and things like that, and arena paths, and vessels like my home, my house is a place where I live. So many of my events take place at home. I sleep there, I cook there, I live there, and stuff like that. But they're connected over time, and they are intertwined. There can be several people living in my house, or I can live there alone, but I have neighbors and stuff like that. So every type of path is connected for a time, but they are connected to each other as well. And that is what I call pathing literacy. And that is a facilitation skill. That's what politics and power and things are. How do we make sure that the right events happen in the right order and after each other? And lifelong learning is another thing we talk about here. How do we understand that we can learn throughout life? We are not static. We have the capacity to evolve, discover new careers, new ways of living. We can move places. Now, in global sense, where most people were born, lived, and died at the same village or the same hunter-gatherer tribe area. But today, we're such a global species, so that we are not stuck in the same village, city, country, or part of the world. Many people have traveled or live in different countries and different parts of the world nowadays, willingly or unwillingly. But there's understanding that this is things like that. So the lifelong path. And how do we facilitate pathing literacy? Of course, the first one was the shaman in the village. He helped everyone understand their life choices and their part in the tribe, and help the tribe in itself navigate events they couldn't explain. They later became the priest or a mystic or something like that. They explained celestial or unexplainable events, because we didn't have science and understanding of the natural world back then. So the shaman and things like that was the explainer of mystical events, but also like helping people with a personal journey within the tribe to make sure, and things like that. And that is the what I call the spirit guide. The role today, we have role models and mentors and coaches and things like that. We also had what I call the rise lighter, because if it's a journey, or rise rise is a travel agent, or reseledare in svenska. But rise light is such a fun word, because I love that word. But you're a travel agent through time. He makes sure you arrive at your destination, whatever that is. It's not a set goal, but it's your spirit guide or something like that. And we have, of course, leaders and bureaucrats today that make up the policy or the things in society. They affect so many possibilities to affect their own life paths, directly or indirectly. So many leaders and bureaucrats and stuff like that are part of an ecosystem of narratives that gives rise for learn it for life. So all of this is connected to what we call a journification and pathing literacy. And of course, many of us can do what we did. We usually don't do today. We have what John Viveke calls ecology of practices, things that help you make sense of your life and your journey, wisdom seeking, sense making, meaning making perspectives. And the exercise we did before Glass Bead Games is one part of several ecology of practices that can help you guide for life by making sense of the world and yourself. But this is something we have to talk and do a lot more about if you want to make it until tomorrow. And by tomorrow, I mean not just tomorrow, but like the next year or the next decade or the next century or the next millennia and so on. So if human society want to make it in a good way, whatever that is, but without too many dystopia and catastrophe and breakdowns of society, we have to practice wisdom seeking and sense making and meaning making and perspective making. So this is part of journeyfication. Then we have unification or weaving. It's two words. Weaving is a word used by many, but unification is the word we choose for our models before we came in contact with weaving in itself. So this is the understanding that weaving together, my writing here is, of course, people, passions, places, ideas, narratives, communities, stakeholders, organizations, institution, groups, clusters, and in a multi-helix model. To understand that if you talk about the journey for time, is the journeyfication. This is the here and now. What are, like, if you understand that all paths are connected, many more things are connected in today's society, and understanding how we connect the right resources with the right person, with the right narrative and things like that. And this is how to make sure the right person does the right job on the right organization, what we call like hiring and things like that today. But it's way more complex than that. So how do we understand that the right person is on the right place doing the right thing? And this is what we call understanding the connection. So a cluster of people, a network of people, or a group of people, how do we make sure they stay connected in the right way? And this is what Bartola has studied so much, what we call social capital. And this is so important because this is, of course, connected in the other things, but we highlighted it because we think we spend way too little energy and focus and attention on weaving today. Many organizations don't have a direct weaver or even a team of weavers employed. We don't employ weavers at our organization and companies today. People who spend most of their full-time day job just weaving, connecting other people's and ideas, so not doing what specialists do. But we can call it type of generalist or wild card. They connect people and ideas and places, so they make sure that the right type of person get this right side of insight and get meet someone. Okay, the classical line, of course. Okay, you work with this, you should talk to that person. You work with this in Gothenburg, but you should talk to this person in Malmö and stuff like that, and connect and send them to a conference, or make sure they when someone is visiting town, they should meet with this and this person for lunch or dinner or party or stuff like that. So make sure that people, the right people get connected with the right people is, of course, the simple, but also that they show up at the right conference, the right arena, or the right event, what we call events and stuff like that. So we have way too few weavers employed in our companies, organizations, and institutions today. And the main reason for this, I think, is because we can't directly measure or price the value in money. We come back to the money thing part. We can't understand that because of this person met this person there, this happened, 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years later, and this created this fantastic opportunity or invention on an event in itself, because we can't see the direct connection. It's indirect and obscure and hidden, and so since we can't see and measure it, we don't understand the value of actually employing a weaver at our organization that full-time just connects people and ideas. Because if we can't measure it, we don't understand that without this wouldn't have happened and stuff like that. And that comes back to Journeyfication. It is all connected. Like I said, all the spiral hairs have all the 4 colors, so they don't act in separation. They're all connected. But this is very important. We need more weavers in society that can see the grander pattern, that work full time with the whole future navigation, but also one part of unification and weaving. Navigating system networks and measurement, entanglement, amplifying the right patterns and suppressing the wrong ones. So, and that comes back with what we're going to call in enableification, amplifying and suppressing narrative and behavioral events and patterns. And things like that. There's a fantastic book called The Seventh Sense, the feeling and the interconnectedness of all things. There's some chapters, 2 of the chapters in this book are super good, and this is the guiding light for me and me developing what we call a seventh sense, the feeling for the interconnectedness of all things. And we have a concept called the future village that I'm going to mention later. That is a concept. What is the combination of the modern village that is not the farmer village, and also the digital village? And if you connect them together, you understand that you live in a village of your own making or someone else making, but you live in your village are the people you know and the people you're connected with, but also connected with all the other types of narratives and agents and arenas and stuff like that. But it's your village, and your village is very distinct. If you think about the old farmer village, everyone knew everyone. There were 250 people living in the village, and everyone knew everyone more or less in that village, and they stayed at the same place most for life. Very few people left and came to the village. That was the same village. But today, your village is very different. And even you take your sibling or your best friend or your partner, most of the people in that person's village are not the same as yours. But still, you have your village, and your partner or friend or brother or father or mother and sister have a different village, even if you are very connected closely. So we talk about Bertola talk about the 3 types of bonding here, the 3 types of social capital: bonding, bridging, and linking. There's much to explore there, and there's a fantastic concept called peopling. How do you make people play nice together or play bad together? How do you make people play together at all? Society. And understanding cluster and cluster literacy is a subterm here. We can understand what happens when you have clusters of things, that there is people and institution organizations located at the same physical or digital space. What happens when you put them together? And that comes back to now we're coming back to the 4th part of this, we call enableification. All kinds of collective and individual value creation. People, competences, places, hubs, ecosystem, habitats, narrative clusters, resources, science, behavioral patterns, to make all of the activities possible. How do you enable for an event that you want to happen, or how do you enable against an event that you don't want to happen? And when we say you, I mean as a person or an institution or as a country. How do you as a person enable for an event, or how do you as a country enable for an event? Enable means you prefer it would happen. You're not the agent that performs the event, but you curl for it, or you take away obstacles or you put up obstacles, depending. If you take away obstacles if you want an event to happen, or you put up obstacles like rules and gates and things if there's an event you don't want to happen. So a perfect example, if you don't want someone to steal your stuff, you put up a lock on your door. That's enabling against it. If you want someone to come uh, buy your product, you do marketing. That's enabling for that. It's two simple examples. Enabling against and enable for type of event happening. But you can't make someone buy your stuff, or you and you can't like 100% stop someone from taking your stuff if they really wanted to. But you can make it easier or harder. So that's a simple, but it's so much complicated than that, because if you take in account very complicated event and very complicated complex event and complex narratives in society, you understand that this is not as simple as have a single rule of law or a single policy, or just like a boss tells someone to do it. It doesn't automatically happen. You can enable for it, but that's so much that maybe there's something you didn't see beforehand, or you weren't aware of the complex weave of narratives that make these events happen. You told someone to do it, but it didn't happen because something else happened that didn't make it happen. You couldn't see that. So enabling is, of course, if you delve deeper into this, the better you become at enabling, you can, of course, understand the complex weave of narratives and events that gives rise to an event and enable for or against it. And that's why we have to get these four: eventification, journeyfication, enableification, unification, and enableification is skills, and they can be performed by the same person, or you can be proficient in some kind of this. But this is four skills and areas in our framework that you can train ourselves as a person or an organization or as a country or as a civilization to get better at, if you understand how we frame them. That's why we made this framework. And to understand that, you have to have the knowledge of what is a society. If you want to enable for a type of event happening in society, you have to understand what the society is in the first hand. That's why I've been spending so much time giving you this overview of what a society and a learning and an economy is. Uh, so more of this and less of that is what Dave Snowden is say. But border condition and constraints, another thing he uses is Connecting framework to understand how do you make events, complex event happen or don't happen. What do we call for? What do we rule against? Opening doors or closing gates? Narrative literacy is, of course, what I talked about before, understanding narrative. But narrative literacy becomes really important if you understand the complex way a society works and where all kinds of events happen and don't happen. So that it is navigating that and exploring this skill of enableification. And we have institutions, bureaucracies, and leaderships, and weavers, and navigators, and maps, and agendas to help us in all this. So it's very complex and connected to all these four fields. So there you have it, the whole overview of this: enableification, journeyfication, unification, weaving, and enableification. Eventification was the first. Whew. I spent many years meditating on this, and so eventification. How does the agent arena narrative journey connect? It's like, I think this is an unfinished slide. I don't recognize this one, but here we have it. We have the four colors here. So we start with enableification. I'm going to read here. We put enabling or limiting constraints on our behavior patterns and our narratives. We remove access to or opportunity to do unsustainable choices. We add opportunities for learning and pro-social value creation opportunities. We allocate the right resources for this to happen. So this is like a narrative. We just wrote about the 4 fields. So we have weaving. We enable social networks and communities to learn and evolve. We connect people, ideas, places, insights, and perspectives. And then we have journification. We enable lifelong learning and the possibility to train all the skills needed for this says the 12th century, it said 21st century. We train people in path making and choice making. How do you make life choices and everyday, day-to-day choices? And lastly, eventification. Every event is an opportunity for value creation, learning, connections, and change of all capitals. We create magical events where this happens and create journey around the right events. And I touched about Future Village before. So this is just a brief overview of what that is. The future village is your friend, family, your work colleagues, the city, and the stores. You usually wishes for your daily purchase or sale of and things like that. But also your digital network and digital village, your social media connections and friends and family you keep connected to through social media. Like it's just not digital, but the old style was, of course, in the old world, you wrote letters to people near and far. Or then we invented telephone and telegraphs, first telegraphs. Then we invented telephone, and now we have social media. We don't even have to call people anymore. We can just text them or post on their profile and stuff like that. But it's still it's a closely and loosely coupled village that we keep together with physical and digital tools. And that is your future village. And you need a future village for value creation in your life. You can't create all the values you have in your life by your own. You don't. There are so many things and products and services in your life that you depend upon others to get the things you need and the things you want. And that is the brief 2-hour plus presentation of our Future Navigators framework. So what is a learning society? What is an event? And how does that depend on narratives, narrative instructions to arise, agency dust? And what is an economy? All the types of resources and capitals in our economy, so we have to reframe away from just using money. I call this double navigation. So you understand that it's complex resource map of everything in your life and in society, what it is, what it consists of, and basically, is it energy, is it part of the biosphere, or is it a human type narrative, and how on all the subgroups of that. And lastly, future navigation. How do you navigate an event spiral to make the right type of event happen and the wrong, and try to not make the wrong type of event happen? So that's a whole complex view here. And there you have it on YouTube. And finally, I have this on YouTube in English. I did this in Swedish in January, but now we have it with slides in English. And of course, my part of this was something I want to come to you, your organization, your event, to give this. I did a shorter version of this in 45 minutes in Swedish, but this is a long explanation. I can do part of it. I can do it in parts. I can do it quick or the long version, or we can even do sling in some generative dialogue and Glass Bead Games exercises on many of the concepts here on the way. So it can be a whole day workshop if you like as well, or a 2-day workshop around all this concept. How do you understand a society, and how do you understand an economy? This is the same, the 2 words to describe. And how do you explain, how do you navigate all this here on planet Earth? So I would love to work with this full time with you, your organization or whatever it is. That's why I do this. And I've spent so many years meditating and thinking and evolving this framework for you, my friend. Namaste. Let's make the future happen. Thank you. And this is us. This is Catapult Future Fest 2018 in Oslo, where we formed the Future Navigators and made made the first prototype of this framework together. And this is me on my 13-year journey of becoming Captain Future and understanding who I am in all this. I am a future captain. That means I use all the things I've talked about in the last 2 hours as my primary tool to navigate and understand society. Yes, that's all I got for you today. And now I'm going to end this stream if I can see if it works here.